All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes from February 20th. Need a motion to approve. Brian? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Post-agenda items. Any post-agenda items? Kevin?
Madam Reeve, I have one in-camera item on FOIP section 21, please.
Okay.
And 2 land matters in camera.
Anything else in post-agenda? Clarence, did you want to add?
Well, there is. I'd like to just have a quick discussion on what's in the long report, mostly because I misunderstood what was in the long report.
For the AGM. Or the annual report.
And
okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Can we have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Hubie moves. All in favor? Opposed? Any notice of motion from council? Nobody here for question period? All right. We will move right to item 8 then, Ag Service Business, and welcome Will and Catherine. Nice to see a different face here, I should say.
Yes, good morning all. We're going to do a tag team here today. So
Perfect.
We'll start the season. Gophers are out. So we'll talk about strychnine. Sales have started for the year, which is good to see. It's always best to do your baiting before the grass greens up. But on another note, on March 2nd, Todd and I sat in on a conference call. And this call was to inform municipalities that of March 4th, 2020, the MRA, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, has decided that strychnine will be taken off the market. So the schedule for removal states that we as a county will still be able to purchase product until March 4th, 2021. We will still be able to sell that product until March 4th, 2022. And then producers will still have 1 more year until March 2023 to use up that product. So we still have to look into a means of disposal should some producers wish to return the product at the end of this period. So in 2017, we sold 1,296 bottles of strychnine. 2018, we sold 1,256. 2019, 1,549 bottles. So we do have 3,200 bottles on hand, and this should be enough to carry us over for the 2 years we have left remaining to sell product. Okay, we're going to start baiting baiting gophers in Rolling Hills, Lake Newell Resort, and the Bazzano Airport. We've had complaints in these areas the past few years. We're unable to use strychnine in these areas, so we bait with Rosol. It's an anticoagulant, and we seem to get not too bad results on it. But, that's usually a 2-week process that, or we can go until it starts getting green and the gophers quit eating the stuff. Tomorrow we pick up some poles, and we're going to start production on our hawk nesting poles. Ready to be, hopefully we can install them by April 1st of this spring. Now that the gophers are out, we can put some time into finding appropriate locations. We'll probably do that next week. So our Coyote Control Incentive Program numbers for 2020. So for the month of January, with our partners, we have received 751 coyotes. February, we received 407. So January is usually higher numbers because the pelts are usually in prime condition and worth more money. February coyotes tend to have degraded pelts. They start rubbing out their hair, and also breeding season begins in mid-February, which causes more rubbing. Equipment. So we've completed all our inspection and repairs to equipment. Everything's ready to go for the new season. Capital items starting to arrive, and we are getting them ready for the season. So our new tractor, the 50 horsepower tractor and hooded sprayer, we've got that in the shop. I think it will be a very invaluable to us, cutting spray times and adding a safer environment for the operator. Whereas right now we're using an open cab, this will have an enclosed cab, so much better when we're out spraying. Hooded sprayer will also allow us to push the limits with wind conditions. This will definitely allow us to cover more area in a season and be more efficient with our spraying programs. Producers have also started calling and booking the seed drills. We are looking forward to another busy season.
All right, I'm going to talk about the ASB grant that was recently reduced. So this went from 11.6 million to 8.18 million provincially, which could potentially mean from going from an estimated $168,000 to $122,000 locally on the legislative side. The environmental side, so environmental farm plans, the CAPP grants, and community engagement has not been reduced yet. So this would leave us with around 15,000. So meetings with contracted services are being scheduled. Grasslands, Volker, City of Brooks, and CPR. Will and I met with Bizano this week, and that partnership will continue. Waiting on final confirmation for seasonal weed inspectors, and then this will be brought to councils for approval. Todd presented at the Academy irrigation event. He had great representation from around the county and talked to a fair amount of producers before and after. He spoke on clubroot, weed control, soil conservation, environmental farm plans, irrigation efficiency program, which is under the CAPP grants, right-of-ways, the good and bad and the problems, and irrigating on the roadways. We held a nutrient management seminar on February 13th. This was held at the County Renewal Building. We had a great turnout with 36 participants. Everyone seemed to take good notes and enjoyed the opportunity. So we hosted interviews over the family week, and we have 5 new faces joining the Ag Service Board, or Ag Services family. We are excited to implement our upgraded training program and are confident that the new members will be a great fit. So as spring quickly approaches, our anxiety increases and our excitement for the 2020 season that it will bring. So that's all we have.
Thanks, Will and Catherine. And questions? Brian.
Well, I can't believe you have anxiety. So your environmental farm plans, you do a lot of that, right, Catherine? So how many would you do a year, and what's the biggest challenges that you face when people come in? Is it, and I guess the other part of that, is it renewals or is it new ones that you're generally dealing with?
So this 2020 season, I've only done about 4 so far. 2019, I did in the 20 numbers, and 2018 was around in the 20 numbers as well. So the greatest challenge, I would say, would just be the time. I like to do it one-on-one with farmers, so I go to the producer's house and we work through, and then that way I get to see their operation and what they're doing, and I can go around to all the buildings. I like going to the Hutterite colonies. It's interesting to see how they operate. Sorry, what was the other part? Oh, renewals. Yeah, for most part, I would say half of those are renewals and the other half are new environmental farm plans. So going forward, I have had word that all dairies are going to have an environmental farm plan, and also potato producers that produce for McCain's and everything, they have to have an environmental farm plan. So I think going forward, I will see more environmental farm plans.
So do you guys have any thoughts on the reduction in the grant from the province?
To tell you the truth, I'm not really sure how that's going to affect us right now. So this news just came out, and I think we need to have meetings with Matt and Todd to know exactly what's going
Yeah.
to
So
come of that.
is it about $45,000?
It affects us about $45,000.
Yeah. Okay. And where has that money been spent? Was it a certain part of the budget?
It usually goes into our spraying programs, hiring, some towards equipment. So it's kind of split up amongst a number of different items.
Okay. Just a little bit more downloading or offloading? Or... Clarence?
So do you see an increase in demand for strychnine in the coming years?
We hope that there will not be any stockpiling. After that last date that I mentioned that producers need to use it, it will be legal to have strychnine. I don't know that they're going to come and inspect everybody's place. They can't do that. But should there be any issues ever and you are caught with strychnine, there could be some serious issues. Yeah. I'm sure some people are going to want to keep a little in the back shed.
So you were saying that we will be responsible for taking back anything after that end date?
I'm not. Oh, sorry, Wayne.
Are we going to be able to return product that we bought to the manufacturer?
So we have to do a little bit of homework on that yet. I'm not sure what that will be. After 2 years, I'm thinking when we've reached our limit for sales, if we have any left in the chem shed, I'm hoping we can sell it back to Maxim. As for the end of the 3 years, if producers decide to return, I don't know that we should go out of pocket to take that product back because we might be stuck with it at that point. So we have to do a little bit more homework on that one.
Just wondering what, if you know, or what will be the next alternative then in replace of strychnine for this need?
I believe we're back to what we were using, 22s. We'll go with the Hawk Nest program. We'll promote that. There is some products out there, but they're still a poison, Rosol and anticoagulant. We do have our foamer, the Rocon applicator. Some of them are very labor intensive, so, but right now to replace strychnine, there is not another product like it, no.
So Rosal, which you use in sort of more public areas, correct?
Yes, you can. I do believe that's what the city uses around town here too. So you can get away with using it in public areas. You have to be out and monitor it each day. Make sure your signage is out there. It's a multiple feed. So if a dog or something like that gets a little bit the one day, it's probably not going to affect them. It's probably about a 4-day feed for an animal before it really starts to affect them. So it should limit some of the secondary poisonings, which is what took strychnine off the market.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, you guys. Do you think it's really spring, or is this just teasing us? Yeah, I guess. But it won't be a long one anyhow, whatever's left. Thank you. All right, we'll go to item 9.1, planning and development. Report.
Good morning, everyone. I just here today as Maria's away doing some training today and tomorrow up in Edmonton, and yeah, pretty straightforward report. Not too much happening as far as permits and subdivision this past month, which is typically to be expected this time of year. Spending lots of time on processes and procedures and getting documentation and that type of stuff straight. So just here to answer any questions anybody might have.
Any questions about the report? Brian?
Well, it's not about the report, it's about something. The cannabis in the cannabis facility that we came in for a development permit in Martin subdivision, how is that proceeding? I get asked questions about that probably more than anything else. Like, are they up and running? I know there was lots of activity there, and if you can't answer it, that's okay. I just thought maybe you'd have some inside information.
I know that they had received their approval to start producing. I do not have any information on what actual operation is happening inside the facility now. There has been a rash of construction, lots of contractors in and out of there, but I can't say what exactly is going on right now. But they have received their approval to start producing.
Anything else? Tracy?
Just on the CNB solar, the Tilly solar, so they had applied and then they reduced the size or whatever, and then that application then was denied by AUC?
Yes, so CNB Solar had planned to begin construction this spring, and I haven't been in contact with CNB Solar. I had sent them an email and just haven't heard back yet. From what we understand, and we knew that their original application had expired. They were aware of that. We were aware of that. They had thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward renewal, basically. I guess with their new application, they went in with an amended site plan, and they did reduce the megawatts. So I'm not 100% sure what that site plan looked like, but they didn't fulfill the requirements that the AUC had for their wildlife surveys and reports. And the AUC said, well, you're missing this. It's in proximity to Fergus hawk nesting areas. We don't think it's in the best interest to approve it at this time. So my guess and my hope is that they'll reapply and go back and do what they need to do, but I have no information on that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jeff. Have a good day. All right, move on to, we need a motion to accept the planning and development report. Kelly moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 9.2, terms of reference for the Joint Services Committee, and we did do some discussion on this last meeting, and I said we'd put it on again in case people had come up with other ideas. There's ideas there on as an attachment, and then I thought Ariana did a good job of summarizing as well in the minutes the additional items that were talked about. It's funny, go ahead, Kelly.
Just had a question, maybe for Lionel, I'm not sure. I was surprised to read under Bazzano's notes that they'd like to reopen the NRSW agreement for payment as one of the priorities as a hard service. Bazzano believes waste management may be low-hanging fruit and a great way to work on intermunicipal relations. I just wondered if this inequality was widespread amongst the board, or if this was news to you as well as it was to me. It's in the notes from Bazzano.
It's in the notes from Bazzano?
Yeah. It's a suggestion for priorities for joint services.
Okay.
Because to me, these organizations are in and of themselves, and joint services would not be a place for this to be discussed. So that was a flag for me.
And I think we did sort of make reference to that last time, not specific to that perhaps, but I think we concluded that NRSW or whatever they're called should be sorting that out as a committee, Lionel, and that's what's happening, correct?
That's exactly right, yes. It hasn't gone anywhere from there. We're still digesting the numbers a little bit, because Bazzano's numbers were a little higher than everybody else's, and we haven't fully determined what that is yet. But that's no reason to throw the whole thing out, because there's a little discrepancy in a few numbers. We will deal with that. That's not a...
So to the point of the conversation here, I just wanted to flag that as not a conversation for joint services.
And is that what people around this table feel too? Wayne? Just to confirm.
Yeah, I agree with Kelly, but I'm worried that these other joint services could be, if you've got a disagreement with another organization, then you'll bring it to joint services to, oh, I don't like this, and we're not getting results over here, so we're going to bring it here. That's not what joint services is for. And I hope that doesn't turn into that.
How do other people think about that? No comments. I just want to make sure what, when we go have this joint services discussion, if we can mention this whole concept. I mean, it certainly would add, it was sort of part of that regional discussion idea that, we could discuss a lot together, but we didn't get there. So in my mind, the committees are such as they are at the present time, and would stay that way. Tracy?
I think joint services could be an area for discussion on it, but as far as, making decisions or whatever, it should go back to the bodies that are dealing directly with it. So back to neuroregional services. If you have everybody in the room, there's representation from all the municipalities, it could be a discussion at some point, but it should go back to the bodies that are there to know regional service waste.
Until the whole system was changed, that's all that could happen. Kevin, I saw your hand up at one point.
Yeah, I think what Bazzano was getting at there is that if there is regional administrative items, that this committee may be the one that would deal with it for recommendations. Now, if it's particular to the operation of the landfill or something like that, of course that board is going to make that decision. But when it's dealing with the municipalities and there's political and administrative representation through this committee, it's a different look than what the landfill or the water corporation would look at it. So it's whether or not that type of regional service levels are something that this committee should deal with, whether it's planning, whether it's waste, whether it's recycling, whether it's water, sewer, garbage, transportation networks, drainage. You know, so I think that's what Amanda was talking about there, was that there was a request to look at the rates and who was paying for what. There was a suggestion that it be changed to assessment. There was discussion that it could go with some more user fees or user pay so that it becomes more of a user facility. And those discussions, Bisano was suggesting, could happen at the level where there's both political and administrative support. So whether or not the committee deals with it there, I mean, that's up to council what you would like that committee to do, but I think that was the intent.
And Lionel, Tracy, and to Kevin, who are most often at that table, we could do that at any time, basically, at the present time, right? The conversation is wide-ranging, I think. Whether or not we want the committee to do that would be another thing, I guess. Yes. Wayne.
There's only one problem I have with that. This committee has no power. They can come back to council and recommend things to us.
Yeah.
But I see this, what Bisano is bringing forward is saying they can solve problems in here. There's no problems can be solved in this committee. You can say we have a problem, and then everybody can take it back to their councils and try to solve this problem. But I'm hesitant to give too much to this committee when the councils are supposed to be the ones in charge.
Tracy?
Well, I think in that case, though, it's that you have that representation. You have your councils from each municipality, you have your administration, and like say you can discuss it, come up with sort of some suggestions, and then it goes back to council, and the councils discuss it anyways. So, you know, you can kind of weed out, well, I shouldn't say weed out, but yeah, I don't see the problem.
I think that's probably happened already at times. Kevin?
Yeah, and Councillor Hammergren's right. I mean, the committee doesn't have any authority to make any changes, especially for the solid waste. There's a veto in that agreement, so every municipality has to agree or it doesn't happen. But it is the working committee, so if there is workings to do on agreements or changes that are outside of just handling waste or dealing with that component, I think the councils are going to require some type of inner workings that can make recommendations, and then each council is going to have to make a decision on whether they support that or not. So you are right, that committee wouldn't have any authority, but it could do the legwork, and then you would have something to deal with rather than each individual council dealing with something and sending it back somewhere.
So the power still remains at the council level. You're absolutely right, Wayne. But I think a discussion or recommendations, as Kevin points out, this has the administrative addition from each municipality as well as the council legislative. So it is a little bit more unique than some of the committees. And other thoughts on it? Discussion to me is always good. And the more I thought about this, the whole concept of what joint services has done, has accomplished, does continue looking at, it keeps us in the room with all of our municipalities at a different level than those committees do. It's just more of a, and I think that discussion is important. I mean, we've worked on ICFs, and even though we've had good communication, good connections to our other municipalities, it takes a while. So without those connections, without those conversations, without that relationship building, at a minimum, at that committee level, it would be a much more difficult job, I think. So to me, that is a purpose in itself. Kevin?
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more onto that, I think the important thing for recommendations to come is where council would like that committee to focus, because it's not going to have time to deal with absolutely everything, but there's going to be a number of items that you see that could be most productive for that committee to deal with, and I think that's sort of part of that exercise. Everybody might have different viewpoints, but if you come together, you might be able to pick a common vision of a number of items that it could deal with. It could stay status quo too.
Just sort of my thoughts on sort of the makeup. I like the idea of having two representation of council members from each municipality. I think that gives, it brings forward a very regional approach to it, which I liked.
Councillors?
Councillors, yeah, as part of the makeup. I struggle a little bit with having CAOs present. I know it can be, maybe a little bit redundant sometime if the agenda isn't if there's not a lot of questions asked, but sometimes I think it is very important to have administration there because they have all the ins and outs. So I still kind of, I think that we should still have the representation from our CAOs at that table. And then the other thing that my thought was on the luncheon, and I think that if we just start at one, that's extra funds that we don't need to spend, and come at one. People sure, you eat lunch and you visit a little bit, and that's socializing, but people do that anyways. They stay after the meeting and they visit, and so I think that just as far as saving funds, I think we could probably omit that. Start at 1 o'clock and go from there.
The other thing is how we deal with the preliminary meeting that we sometimes have to have with the city, with the municipal planning business, which we haven't had to do with the other communities because we don't often have meetings regarding planning or subdivisions or things that come up in our fringe areas except with the city. So we've been putting those two meetings together, which sometimes the other communities are interested in what we're talking about and sometimes they're not, definitely. So these are things also that the other communities would be able to, I guess, when we look at these, what we've been given as feedback, they're talking about the joint services discussion, totally, not the planning things. So the city and we can talk about that too. Because I think when there is those conversations that perhaps it should be our Div 5 and 10 councillors that are involved in those. So if we decide that it doesn't matter who goes to the joint services meeting, we need to have perhaps a different setup for the municipal development planning issues. Wayne?
How often do you have discussions with the city over planning and development and stuff?
I would think, things have slowed down, and I think it's visible with those meetings, but I would say 5 to 7 times, 5, 6, 7 times a year. I could look back because Pam would know from how many minutes, because Pam and our planning department go to those, so could get an answer to that. Lionel?
The only concern I would have with splitting it off from the IMDP from joint services is that IMDP's meetings take 10 minutes sometimes. And for us to travel into the community to have a meeting for a 10-minute discussion is quite a waste of a lot of time, in my opinion. So if we combine it with joint services, at least some of us are at the table there anyway. It's not a separate trip into town for that purpose.
Right. Well, maybe we can look at the stats and see how many times it would be. And you're right, Lionel, it is often not very long, but there have been some that are. So we can figure that out, I think. Kevin?
Yeah, I know part of the focus of the new IDPs is to be able to do that more so by not having to have a meeting unless there are issues that surface from the members. So circulation, of course, the city's IDP is up for review with now, and I don't know how that's going to shake out, but that was the intent, because you're right, a lot of it is information, and if there's no issues from the city on a development in the county, or if there is an issue and they want to have a meeting, then they have that ability to call it. So it may be changed in the future and how that is, but until we go through that agreement or update on that plan, then we don't know for sure.
Hi, just based on the agendas that are saved in Laserfish, it looks like there were 9 IDP meetings last year.
Yeah, and out of those 9, how many had any discussion? Like there was, like I can remember a couple that we actually had some discussion. So I guess if the information is circulated and then the desire to call a formal meeting could happen. Yeah.
It will be part of the IDP then, how that is taken care of. As Kevin pointed out, if there aren't issues, then there will be no reason to meet. Brian?
Well, I think the biggest reason this part is up for discussion is the concept that we would not necessarily have Div 5 and 10 at the table. And so how does that work for for a planning meeting when it's affecting your area? Now, I guess, is that any different from us deciding on a planning issue that's in Rosemary or Tilly or whatever? We still have to have that information. So I'm not sure it's relevant, but I think that's the reason, the purpose of us, the representation at the table.
Yeah, and our fringe community, if Bazzano does have something, we do have a Bazzano committee, and we have a lot of different committees for those, actually, right, at the present time, if it's with the other municipalities, anyhow. So.
The other question I had was I couldn't find it today, but I know it's in there, about the concept of a revolving
Yes.
the administration responsibility of taking care of the meetings or taking care of the minutes and that. I wasn't sure how that was going to be received. And I know that we have capacity and the city has capacity. I'm not sure the other ones do, or how willing they are to be able to do that. I think it's a great idea. I just don't want to throw it out there and put somebody in a position where they say, well, we can't really do it. So,
Kevin, did that idea come from the CAO's meeting by any chance?
No, we discussed it, but everybody has different views, and Brian's right. The others may not have capacity to do that or want to do it, but if that was the direction the committee wanted to go, then they could always say, we pass on that and somebody else can take it. But my thinking when I put that in there was that then there wouldn't be a focus from one particular municipality on the agenda or dealing with what gets in the agenda, and it broadens the perspective. So if a municipality is looking after that and they have some discussions and they have some ability to put some items on the agenda that may not normally get the focus. So
Yeah.
I think either way it works well now. It's just an idea if for a little more inclusion that might be a way to do it.
Which certainly I think we should talk about at our next joint services meeting. And the two representatives representatives from each council. It could be a tough one too, because there are councils that would be 2/3 of their council, or 2/5. And in fact, some of the times to have one councillor from some of the other communities is difficult. But for the most part, there has been at least one. So that could be an interesting discussion there. Also, Clarence.
So we dealt with planning and development, and how do we deal with economic development
At that level.
at that level?
Yeah.
Because it seems to, you know, when the county was responsible, it was kind of a county initiative. When the city is responsible, it looks like it's kind of a city's initiative, and I don't really see a lot of decisions being made at the joint services, and yet I think it is discussed every time there.
We're updated, yeah. Maybe that needs to be a question for the committee, if that system is working well. That would, you know, should that be a separate committee, or is it good the way it is under the joint services? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it would seem to me as the two major partners are the economic drivers there, that
Yeah.
it should be more of a joint decision on how that works, rather than what we're seeing today. And we're both major parties are guilty. Or, you know, it just naturally happens that way because of where the staff is. Anyway, just a thought.
Right, and it was a conscious decision we made to, we done our turn, and so, Tracy, Kevin?
We do have, though, like we have one meeting where we do a workshop where anybody present, we discuss sort of the goals for that year for economic development. So municipalities could bring it forward at that time if they have something specific that they'd like the committee to work on. So I think the last ones, well, I can't remember exactly what was all thrown out there for ideas, but, you know, it was like business retention and retention and getting new businesses. There was quite a few different ideas anyways.
Empty inventory.
Yeah, that to do an analysis of what's available as far as business properties that are available and that kind of thing. So they kind of, you know, there's that opportunity that we would all have to give direction to the economic development, and then the city would oversee that these are things that are being done, is sort of how I look at it.
We sort of work on the terms of reference for the Economic Development Committee, so that joint, all the munis are there for that. So. Kevin?
Yeah, so that's a good discussion. I think that my personal view is that economic development should probably be a committee of its own, and it should be expanded to the players in the economic development field, reps from NRTA and PEP if they're involved, or CBL or something that can pull the goals and initiatives of economic development and then fan them out to whoever needs to undertake the work. I do think that there's a lot of benefit in coordinating and working together and taking ownership of certain things. And I think there's a gap. I mean, the positive side for the small municipalities that come to these meetings is they get to deal with everything at one meeting. So that's a real positive. But I do think when it pertains to economic development, they do a great job, but I do think that there's a gap in communication and working together with the other economic development players. And the ideas and what they could do together over the long term, I think would be a good initiative. But how that would work out would probably have to be a separate committee and separate meeting.
And again, a conversation that we can have. Lots to talk about, think about. We've put this over until our next meeting, which is next Tuesday. So probably won't be the last time you hear about it. All right, thank you. I see that Cole just walked in. Wasn't sure if he would be here or not, but it looks like he is. And maybe we pop to item 9.5. It looks like he's just signing in, which is the payment register for council. I'll have a look at any questions there. Remember, this is something that we tell the auditors always that we look at and know what's going on each month. So questions are always welcomed. Ellen.
Just curious, it was paid to a person in GEM and it's called a snagger tools. Does that have anything to do with fire, perhaps? The bill was $299.29 paid to a person in GEM. Snagger tool, I had never heard of that.
Do you know where the name?
The name is Colin Reed, and it's towards the end, so it's on page 3.
Snagger Tools, Jim. I think he is on the fire department. Dwayne Clausen is the chair, and I'm sure that we can find out. Kevin's got it.
Yeah, so it is a fire tool. Ashley has done the account payable and Stuart has approved it.
I think sometimes whoever is, depending on where they work and what they know about and how to access something, probably. Anything else on that? Yeah, Tracy.
With our Allneticare or Allnet CA, the hosting at 2,000, just over 2,000, is that a monthly charge or is that kind of we pay for it once a year? It's EFT 583.
Under allnet.ca?
Yeah. Yep.
Is it some sort of licensing or something?
So in 2019, we had 4 charges paid to AllNet. Website hosting, meeting hosting, their annual subscription, and one says avoiding a duplicate. So we paid them a total of about $12,400 last year. And it's all approved by Roberta.
And so this part would be for that agenda that we use? No, Ariana knows.
No, the hosting would be the website. If it's meetings, it's the AllNet meetings and the AllNet website. They're 2 separate things.
Oh.
So if it says hosting, it's going to be for the website.
Anything else? If not, get a motion to accept payment register. Clarence moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And welcome, Cole. Join us, please. And Cole's item is 10.1. Utilities report.
Thank you, Reeve Douglas and councillors. I apologize for not having a report for you in front of you in your package. I was gone for a couple of weeks and it was a little early to submit before I left, and I missed the deadline before I got back. So I will just have to give it to you verbally. So we'll start off with the Hamlet distribution systems. It's kind of was a busy month for us. Our year-end reports to Alberta Environment are due at the end of the month, so we submitted on the county's behalf 12 waterworks systems annual reports and 4 wastewater system annual reports. So those were all completed and submitted before the end of the month, February deadline. So that's been all taken care of. We had Hawk Corporation on site for all the water systems in that the county owns. So they were there to calibrate all the online analytical equipment. And if you recall, this is a required annual maintenance task that's mandated by Alberta Environment and Parks. So they came in and calibrated all the equipment so everything, all the analyzers are working properly. So that was done and no issues, no major issues found there. For the rural water project, we did have a little bit of an issue. The supply to the landfill, it froze in the meter vault. So we had a hydrovac go out and thaw the line, and we replaced the meter because the frostbite cracked on it. So that was all taken care of. We do have insulation in those meter vaults, but for some reason that one froze this year. So we made sure that everything was placed back in properly as far as the insulation goes. So hopefully that was just a one-off kind of thing. So for your wastewater collection, I had mentioned in previous reports that we had removed a pump at the Lake Newell Resort lift station. It is back and we installed it yesterday, so we're just kind of finishing that up today. We also did some minor electrical upgrades to that site as well. Most of all your other lift stations have quick disconnect, plug and play kind of power lines to those pumps. They were hardwired in at Lake Newell, so it required an electrician to install and uninstall every time. So we got that upgraded to the plug-in types so that are suitable for sanitary wastewater lift stations like that. So that was also completed at the same time. So that is all up and going again. And we also had to pull a pump at the Tilly lift station on February 22nd. It was clogged with debris, and that happens every once in a while. It was pulled up, clean, placed back into service, and everything's working fine there. And on NRSC's in-house, we did have a little bit of a small leak on the NRSC transmission main leading into the Rolling Hills pump house. It was just on an air release valve. It was hydrovac down, tightened some bolts, and everything's good to go again. But we had to do a little bit of work, so if anybody saw any us working by the entrance to Rolling Hills, that was what we were doing there. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions.
Questions, tough ones for Cole, seeing as he's been away for a while. Got to get him broken in again. So it's been a pretty good winter compared to February last year.
All in all, everything's, touch wood, has been good so far. So
yeah.
Hopefully we don't have another cold snap late in the winter like we did last year. So.
Well, it looks like you've satisfied all of their questions already. Cool. So all good? Oh, Lionel.
Just a question about line locations. So the discussion came up the other day that we didn't put tracer wires in on the rural water lines, but they are all GPS, are they not?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. That was my knowledge too, and that's where I left it, but it doesn't matter. It's just that somebody was concerned there were no tracer wires, that's all.
No, it actually works really, really well with your web-based map system. So our operators can log on, use the GPS in our tablets, and get to like a valve or a air release valve or a hydrant or anything like that, and almost walk right to it. So there is tracer wire from what I understand, but the GPS definitely is all in there and is working really well.
The question that comes up every now and then was a lot of money at the time on another big already too big of a pile of money, I guess, Lionel. All right, thank you, Cole. Have a good rest of the day and week.
You as well. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to our municipal services report. We do have delegation at 11 from Canadian Association of Petroleum folks. So,
okay, I should make it fast then, hey?
Well, I don't see anybody. You're not Kelly, are you? No, okay.
I guess the big thing for council is there's a correction from my January report, which you would have read about. That's just one of the trials and tribulations of tying down some of the numbers that we're trying to provide information for council. So my apologies on the January error in numbers. And in that, when I was looking for information this month, I made a mistake reporting that our stockpile program is 77% complete, where we're actually sitting at 58%. Rolling Hills stockpile is currently at 77. We still have yet to do a bunch of work on the Tilly stockpile. So with that, we've continued with winter operations as needed, whether it be grader operators or truck drivers. Respond as weather events warrant. Right now, we're kind of in that transition, I guess. It looks like spring is upon us. The gophers are running around on the prairie and all that kind of jazz, and culverts are froze up and water's flowing over some roads. Few, but some. And of course, roads are becoming soft. We're getting a number of phone calls from ratepayers about getting stuck on roads and stuff. It's just kind of a different spring again, where we had a snowfall. We had some of that snow melt into the road surface. The frost is still holding that from going down into the road bed, and it's creating 2 to 4 inches of ruts on our roads, and we're just going to have to be patient with the weather and allowing things to dry. We're not really capable of throwing a 45 or 60,000 pound machine on our road to take care of things, because we will end up in far worse shape than what we are today. MD of Tabor is no different. Cypress County is no different. We're all kind of in that same boat right now. We just have to be patient with the weather and let things happen. Otherwise, Jeff's been working pretty diligently with North Headgate's plan there. So we've had the engineers out. We've done some walkthroughs. We're trying to do some field fitting to make sense out of what the engineered plan is versus what's on the ground in the field, and try to make things best fit to have as little impact as possible, but still get what's desired out of things. And getting ramped up for that. If council remembers, we have the street lights and intersection widening of 15th Avenue and 2nd Street West / 873. He's trying to get that tender work out, working with the city on that, of course. What other highlights have we kind of got? 5 out of the 7 trucks through Enterprise have arrived. The other 2 are expected to be here in the next week or 2. So we're looking at getting those flipped, getting the existing units off to market for sale, and then we will be back in front of council to let you know how the 18-month ownership plan worked out for us, and where the costs came in, and whether it's a valuable program, getting us ahead, keeping us equal, or if we're falling behind. So get that to report to you, and really that's the month's report. You've been able to read the rest, so if you got any questions, I'd be more than welcome to answer those.
Questions for Mark? Are there any provincial road bans on yet?
I don't know about locally, but I know that the emails have been rolling out about road bans being imposed. I just haven't paid attention to anything local with that. So
it did, eh?
Okay.
The whole thing, right from the 550 north?
Probably.
Right to my driveway. Yes, there was a big flurry of activity the other day about, are the road bans on? And I said, I'm not going to go look for signs, but...
And the interesting thing is, when we take a look back, there's been a lot of work done by the province too to reduce the number of bans that they impose in our region, because they did get additional lifts of asphalt down on Highway 556 and 561 to reduce those bans. 544, I don't know if they're going to ban this year because they just overlaid all of that, so we'll have to watch and see that, but that's another one that generally goes on. And then, of course, we got Highway 876, it's a gravel road that we're talking about bans, but we're monitoring with Alberta Transportation just to see what we have to do because the road is technically under construction and some of it is in a poor state. So whether it be a reduced speed limit, warning signs up about conditions, hazardous conditions, or just banning it altogether and reducing loads going down it to make sure it's safe, right? So,
Lionel.
Just a note, the last snow event, I was really glad to see that the county didn't pour a whole bunch of salt on the road, which wasn't necessary at all. When I got off of our road onto the secondary highway, it was just horrible. Like they poured it on there. It was ridiculous. So I'm just glad to see that you're being a little less generous with the salt. That's I appreciate that you're not using as much.
There's been quite a difference in how much snow has fallen in different areas of the county, too, in the last few little snowfalls. So, Kelly.
You've been doing a good job about peeling back trees and branches from the road allowance, in the road allowances, and that's noticeable. That is, that program must be, I mean, it's going to come to an end, I would think, because there is only so many trees that we can peel back. But it is noticeable now that Alberta Transportation is not keeping up their road allowances. So we do contract service for it with them on weed spraying. I wonder if it would be an opportunity for us to partner with Alberta Transportation to offer that service in the future.
if memory serves me right, every year we talk with Alberta Transportation about these items. I guess some of it could come down to a decision of council and working with Alberta Transportation. Is it a cost to the county or something that we bill back to them? Because if it's something that we bill back to them, I don't think they're exactly that inclined because they're working within the budgets that they have. And if they had work, they would probably be more than willing to work with us. But otherwise, they hire other people out and they're just, I don't think you're going to see crack sealing this year. I don't know what other kind of provincial cuts are coming again this year with roads, but they virtually have little to none, if not even less than they had in previous years for roads. Generally, they cut the crack sealing. They're already down to what we're moving to in cost-cutting measures. They've been doing it for years, where they only paint one direction of travel on the road lines, so the center line will get painted every year, but the opposing road shoulder lines, I think you're going to see bigger cuts yet, and I don't think that they're too worried about some of the operational challenges that they face in putting a plow truck out a little more often, although we would sit there and argue that if you took care of the trees, you wouldn't have to send the plow truck out as often. So with the tree cutting, may I ask, you're seeing positive observations that we're not having as much drifting, that ice formation is not occurring because the sun can get on the road, the sun can dry the road better? Is that what you're praising us for, or? Because that's what we're striving for, is to improve road safety for motorists. Because we can drive 5 miles with a grader before we find the next snow drift that we have to knock off with the grader. And you're running about $130 an hour with a grader, right?
Yeah, so what I'm dealing with are ratepayers who say we're cutting down trees and it takes forever to grow trees in this country. So I have to defend our actions. And when Alberta Transportation doesn't keep up with their required cleanup, it takes us to another conversation. Like, are we overdoing it? Are we doing make work projects? All kinds of negative. So it's a learning process for our ratepayers, and I have to be able to work with that.
The biggest thing that I can iterate to council is we are in the business of managing roads, road safety being the most important. Where we have trees growing in road allowances, whether that's dense trees or an occasional tree, it's an opportunity for snow to drift, shade to be provided to the road, so you have that muddied hazard that unsuspecting or unknowing motorists might encounter. If it's a grove of trees or whatever, you potentially have the risk of wildlife stepping out in front of a motorist. We're trying to alleviate those. Somebody drives off the road due to muddy conditions or whatever and runs into a tree, are our ratepayers willing to deal with the lawsuit, or were we better off investing to remove the hazard before the incident or accident happened? That's what we're trying to manage. We've had this conversation a few times in my tenure here with the county over the 12 years. I encourage trees on your property. If you want to help the taxpayers and yourself save money, plant them well back from your property line so that they're not shading the road, they're not whatever, but we know how yard sites get set up and stuff. Plant as many trees as you prefer on your property, but road allowances really aren't the place for trees to be growing if we want to manage the liability for our ratepayers and lawsuits.
Lionel?
Speaking of trees, so you did take quite a number of trees out. The stumps that are left, are you I presume you're going back and going to grind those? And
yeah, we've had a few concerns iterated. Some councillors have contacted us. First phase is we go in and we cut. Chainsaws, we don't run them down in the snow because we don't know what foreign objects or hazards are present, whether it's barbed wire, coiled up TELUS line, who knows what all's there, rocks even, damage the equipment, pose risk and safety to our operators. So cut the trees, come back. Council approved the purchase of a mulching head. It's a vegetation management head. Go in there, we just grind it all up. It's an attachment that goes on the tracked skid steer. And we mow them all down, pulverize it into the ground. And after a year's worth of growth of grass, you almost don't even know that there's any remnants there. Anything large size, we actually have a stump grinder as well that's an attachment. So you're talking 12 inches or bigger. We'll go in there and that stump grinder, you just keep kind of working it across. You take that right down into the soil level with that. And then Ag Services deals with saplings and regrowth through the spraying program.
Thank you. It's the gentleman in the back here is Ryan Wirtz. He's from NRSC Minerals in Saskatchewan. I think their primary business is potash and stuff like that to farmers and stuff like that. Anyway, their organization or the company bought the calcium chloride Lady Carmen place, what we usually refer to it. So they purchased this about a year ago or better, done a whole pile of work in there. So they've been busy trying to sell product for dust abatement throughout Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan. So he did provide a tender. He did ask me if he could attend council and listen to our RFD and figure out what this all is. And I guess if he has any questions, he's free to ask questions too, right? So I'll go through our RFD for the council. We basically put a tender out for 3 years. We advertised it and closed it on February 6th this year. This is the fourth time that we've done a 3-year term for calcium since I've been here. In the past, we were kind of presented with a few challenges when we tender out calcium. What we have asked for in the past is we want a 32% liquid and calcium chloride, and for people to provide a price per liter on it. It kind of provided, the challenges it provided for us is there's a lot of people that provide product that's a little bit stronger, a little bit weaker, and basically that took them out of the equation for being able to provide a tender, or we'd reject their tenders in the past. And most time in the past we did reject a lot of tenders because the concentration wasn't high enough. So did a little bit of research. Alberta government, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, they kind of come up with a way to make it measurable where you kind of discount the amount of water in it. So it's like a flake equivalent. You can buy calcium in prills or like powder form. So it's kind of a measurement where you kind of discard the water about it. So you kind of get a fair and even pricing on it. So what we did, we bid it as a flake equivalent ton. And then also we've just put a minimum requirement, what we required for calcium in it. So I think we were asking like for minimum 25% calcium, and then about a 6 or 8% magnesium in it. So then we'd come up with total salts in it. So trying to level the playing field a little bit so other vendors could provide pricing for us. And then of course we'd be able to get some more competitive pricing in it and for doing our service. So does that make sense? I know Mark was trying to explain it to Mark too. It's tough. Alberta's probably the only place left that actually just bids this stuff in percentage. And so you asked for 32% calcium. There's really 2 companies in the province that can bid it, and that would be Cortec, which been supplying us for 10 years, and then McTaggart, the other big organization. So it did take out companies like these, like gentlemen in the back, and there's other people that can provide alternative products, but they were kind of excluded with it. So our biggest challenge with that is products that are weaker. They do have calcium in them, but there's more water in it. So what you have to do is put more product down to achieve the same results. We did take the product from Brooks last year and applied it on a few roads. We knew we had to put it down at a little heavier rate, so we got good dust control. It did work on the 3 trial roads that we tried. It looked and appeared and worked pretty well. It'd be nice to go from year to year. And then we also put it down on all the shoulder pull roads in Tilly. So after we were done the shoulder pulls, we did put the product down on the roads in Tilly. What we did, we typically put calcium down at 2 liters per square meter. We put it down at about 3. So we did put it down a little bit heavier, but it seemed to get as good as results as we would expect with calcium. Probably do a little bit more this year just to make sure it's consistent and we get results from year after year. So it's a good thing to try out. Our biggest savings with the product here in Brooks is trucking. Right? I can buy it, about half our cost is trucking. All the product we purchase now comes from Edmonton or north of Edmonton, so there's a lot of trucking involved in getting the product down here. Disadvantages, I know the McTaggart product and the Cortec product, it does work. We've been using it for years and years and works really well. So we're happy with it, but still looking for ways to make savings. And I think if stuff here we're confident works in the tender, there is potentially some savings there. So. Little bit, so 2019 we utilized just a little over 2 million liters. Our price of the product was 22.8 cents, right? So if we actually converted that to flake equivalent, it would have worked out to $425 per ton. So that's kind of what I use for my baseline for doing this year's tender. So what we did is the tender that won it this year was Cortec again. They did submit a price in for this year's product that we're asking to award it from them. Their submitted prices was about 80% less than what we paid last year. So their price they did submit was lower than what we ended up last year with a price in for when we put it down. So about an 82% saving this year. And then of course it's a 3-year tender, so it worked out to about an 88% savings in 2021 and 22. Price per liter, I guess. Last year we paid 22 cents per liter. This year we're paying 18.6 and 20 cents for the other 2 years. So I did have a summary on our unit prices on our RFD. There was one tender that we couldn't accept it because they kind of made an error in their unit pricing. Of course, we sent it off to Brownlee to get their advice on it. Because of the way our tender's written, we couldn't accept that tender as how they submitted their quantity pricing, so we had to disregard their their present, or for their, I guess, their tender for their quotes. So, and that, I guess in summary, what it ended up being is Cortec did end up being the lowest for the next 3 years. 3-year cost for their price for their product would be a little over $1 million. So, yeah, so I guess I'm sitting here, we can asking for you guys, we maybe award the tender for 3 years for Cortec again, or reject them all as presented. So we're happy with what we're going to have here for product again for 3 years. So.
Excuse me. Thanks, Terry. Questions from council? Clarence.
So I guess you can't really criticize too much because we're paying even at coming years less than we did last year. But I do wonder about the value of doing it for 3 years when nobody really knows what they have as costs for 3 years. And how much, if I'm guy bidding, I'm going to play it safe. So is the relationship building, as you point out, that important that we're willing to pay more?
I believe it does help. I know when we've worked with Cortec, well, we've been working from 10 years. It is nice when you get going. I know who I'm dealing with trucking. I know how their billing works. They know how we work. It's a fairly, when we actually put down calcium, there's a lot of steps that go and happen quickly, right? I mean, you go back from the grading to putting on the product to grading, packing, leveling out, and watering it. Having somebody that's familiar with our process, it is nice. It is a nicety. As far as whether it's worth bidding it and holding on it for 3 years, don't know. If the price of oil goes really, really high and all of a sudden their trucking goes through the roof, we're locked in for 3 years, or it could go the other way. It's a tough one. The next thing is the time, right? We got it down pretty good, but it still takes probably 10, 15 hours of my time, plus Mark's and Jeff's, looking and reviewing and redoing these tenders. There's a lot of that time that's involved in it too, which is savings for us, right? We don't have to redo the tender year after year. Got it set up pretty good. I mean, it's just, for us, it's time savings a little bit doing it every 3 years. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough locking in something for 3 years. I don't know. It's better for us operational wise, but for the costs and savings, I mean, we could bid it out next year. It could be quite a bit higher again too. I don't know. It's a tough one to justify or analyze. We like it. That's how we figure it's good for us operational wise and time savings and stuff like that, and the relationship and having the process down so it's quick for us. So,
is there a minimum amount that you have to purchase in order to get this price?
No, I don't think so, no. We tell them we are going to use about 1,000 metric tons of it, or around, right around 2 million liters, but we tell them that's what we tender in there. I'm sure if we turned around and told them we were going to use maybe like a 10% of it, they might question it and ask. I mean, that's what we tender out, what we use for the program for that duration. We kind of know what we're using. And as a vendor, I probably would be concerned if all of a sudden we said we're going to use 10% of what we tendered out. Why didn't you tender that out, right? There again, too, for me, if things change, or I mean, what if nobody applies for calcium this year because we raised the price up a little bit and all of a sudden our program goes in half? I just tell them that, be honest with about it, and that's just the fact of life. I have no control on how much we're going to put down from year to year, right? Or if we decided to pull a whole bunch more off for county paid, right? So. They still tendered cheap, and they know that we've gone down, like we've knocked off 60, 70 kilometers. Our program's already shrunk 25, 30% from the previous years because the stuff we removed already, and yet their prices coming down. So they would question it, but I don't think they would quit supplying us at that price.
Other questions? So we have a recommendation here. Oh, sorry.
Just going to make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. That would be option 1, to award the tender to Cortec Calcium as they are the lowest bidder for supply for 3 years. No further discussion. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Ryan, so you are here from NSC Minerals. And obviously, Terry, you have come to know Ryan before today, or Ryan just showed up to see what we do, how we operate? Which is excellent. Very much appreciated. And so this is the Lady Carmen people now. I mean, that's the way Lady Carmen was around when I first got here, so I remember that name. Okay. And Mark?
Yeah, I'd just like to identify to council that with the award to Core Tech, we always leave ourselves a little bit of room to dabble with other products to see how it's working against what we are doing. So it's not an exclusive supply of, it is for the primary program, but Terry has always remained open to trying things as they're introduced. Before we go forward with any of those trial products, lots of times there's conversations with our peers next door to us, being Tabor, Lethbridge, Wheatland, all that kind of area, to see what's worked. The pros, the cons, the costs, the performance, the ratepayer feedback, what can they share with us before we move into something. And then of course we've been through it before as well, that when somebody new comes forward with something, they put it down, their cost, we're no risk other than we've got the liability of doing the trial, because we've been burnt in the past of laying product that lasted 2 weeks and shelling out a lot of money for something that just didn't perform right. So Terry is always keeping an open mind, looking for alternative products and working with that. So
yeah, and certainly, Ryan, it's great when we can buy things local, right? I mean, that if it works for us. So great to meet you today. Thank you for coming to our council meeting and being interested. Not many people are. Very truly. Isn't that the case, guys, right? Even when people have put in tenders for stuff, we don't often put a face to a name. So good job. Thank you. Okay. That's it for municipal reports today. All right, thank you. And Kelly is here. So are the roads bad today, Kelly, or what's? Well, we're here still, so we didn't. Yes, we didn't. Not too often can't we fill our time, so. Kelly, you've been here before. Okay. Okay. So council, we are, Kelly is our 11 o'clock delegation on our agenda, which is item 7.1, just so you know where we are at. My messy agenda, we've been all over today. But welcome, Kelly, and Ariana, you ready to go? So we'll do some introductions first.
Perfect.
And obviously, because I'm doing the talking, you probably haven't figured out that I might be chairing the meeting, and I am. My name's Molly Douglas, and I am the Reeve, and I represent, I always look over there thinking that's a map, but it's not, the northern part of the county of Newell, the area around Gem and Finnegan and Duck Lake, up around the Red Deer River part of the world. And we'll go over, we'll do our introductions, and then we'll let you introduce yourself and take it away. Lionel.
Good morning. My name's Lionel Juss, and I represent an area in the center of the county, north and east of Brooks.
Perfect.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Hammergren. I represent probably one of the southern part of our county, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City, which is Division 4.
Good morning, Huey Kellen, Tilly area east of Brooks.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Unruh, and I represent Division 7, which is around the village of Rosemary.
Hi, Kelly. I'm Tracy Fife, and my division is 5, and so my area covers south and west around the city of Brooks.
Morning, Kelly. Clarence Amulin, and I live in the southeast corner, a little area called Rolling Hills.
Morning, Kelly. We just talked on the phone the other day. I'm Kevin Stevenson, County Administrator. Welcome.
Morning, Kelly. I'm Kelly Chrisman from the west side of the county around Bazzano. You probably came through there.
Morning, Brian DeJong, and I represent the area around the village of Dutchess.
Morning, Ariana Nielsen, Executive Assistant.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Lane Johnson, Director of Corporate Services.
Perfect. Nice to meet you. Perfect. Well, I will jump right into it. So my name's Kelly McTaggart. I'm a Community Engagement Advisor for Western Canada with CAPP. So through our program, we run outreach initiatives from Saskatchewan all the way to BC. So lots of territory to cover, and we execute this program. There's 2 of us, so myself and Chris Montgomery. I've been with CAPP for about 2.5 years, and prior to that, I worked in the pipeline industry, specifically in Indigenous engagement, which is obviously a hot topic in Canada right now. So it's been quite interesting to move over to CAPP and see broader issues and work with municipalities and rural municipalities as well. So just to re-familiarize you with CAPP, we are the largest industry organization in Canada. So we function as a lobby organization, but we also work with policy issues from coast to coast. So we have offices in Newfoundland all the way to Victoria. And Calgary is our largest office. We have about 80 people in Calgary. So we are well covered throughout Canada, and our members explore, develop, and produce natural gas and crude oil. So we don't necessarily represent the pipeline companies. They are associate members, many of them, but our focus is primarily on production. And our producers produce about 80% of Canada's natural gas and oil. So I always like to start with this infographic. This is up to date as of a couple weeks ago, and it has actually changed pretty dramatically since the past couple of years. So you may have seen this infographic before, but I wanted to walk you through it. So this is the energy mix from 2018 to 2040 if we're going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement targets. So that being said, if you look at renewables, which is where I like to start, we are seeing a rapid increase in renewables, and this covers, solar, wind, run-of-the-river, and other forms. And we're seeing an increase in renewables of over 400%. So this is what we're going to see from now until 2040. So very significant. But it's important to note that it is not outpacing the fossil fuels. So in terms of oil, we are seeing some stagnation globally, but still continuing to climb. Natural gas is really the steepest increase, globally speaking, for energy sources. So that's where I'd like to start. So natural gas is really where we're looking in terms of an investment point of view. It is good news, yeah. And that's really the story that we're trying to tell more in Alberta, especially with LNG. So we do a lot of polling at CAPP. We use a third party. And one of the things that has come back consistently over the past couple of years is that Albertans really don't know what LNG is and what the opportunity is in Canada. So although we're still seeing some investment in the oil sands and production there, really the future of our industry is moving in and developing the natural gas space. So that being said, in terms of upstream capital investment, again, these are new numbers as well. So 2019 was a pretty rough year. We actually we lost a lot of capital investment in Canada, especially from American companies. We saw some majors leave Alberta entirely.
The good news is we are seeing an uptake in terms of oil sands. We're seeing a 9% increase in foreign capital investment. And in the conventionals, which covers natural gas and also conventional drilling of oil, we're seeing an increase of 5%. So this is good news, but I always preface it by saying that this is more of a balancing out. It's not that we're getting a huge flush of investment. It's that, you know, some of these major players have left, and now we're seeing more of a plateau, is how I like to describe it. But still a good news story, and I think as we look forward to some of the government regulations that are coming into place, we will see increased investment over the next 10 years. So in terms of crude oil prices, this actually shows a flattening out as well, to put that into perspective a little bit. But we are seeing some volatility, and I will talk about Corona or COVID-19 near the end of my presentation, but this will affect these numbers. So this was our forecast as of, you know, the beginning of Q1, and we're going to see more volatility and flattening out of prices because of the virus. So we still have a pretty major differential. This morning, you know, Western Texas Intermediate was trading at about 53. We've been seeing it in the low 50s for a while now, and Canada generally is trading at about $20 less than that. So we're at 31, I think it was, this morning. So in terms of oil pipelines, pipeline capacity in Western Canada is full, pretty full across Canada, but in terms of our major main lines, we are full. So we're looking at the Alberta Curtailment Program. This was implemented by the current government, and this allows for increased rail capacity. But in terms of projects to alleviate this price differential, we really need at least 2 of these major projects to go ahead. So we will see a lessening of the gap with one of them, but nothing significant and long-term. Enbridge Line 3 is moving ahead. They've finally moved forward with the issues that they were having on the regulatory side in the United States, specifically through Minnesota. So the Canadian portion of this project is done, but some of the final issues that they were encountering with the states. So we're looking to have this fully in service in the next couple of months. They've already started commissioning this line. Keystone XL, this is a very lengthy and uncertain project. TC continues to push forward. The messaging that we get is the same as the public's getting, which is that this project will be going ahead. So they have had some breakthroughs in terms of the environmental reviews on this project, which were mostly actually in the United States. So we'll wait and see, but I do think some of the determining factors will be the upcoming election in the US. In terms of Trans Mountain, this is the most important project of these 3 because it signifies a new market, which is the Asian market. Currently, we are not exporting any oil off of the West Coast. So in terms of growth and opportunity for new markets, which is what we're looking for in the competitive era with the United States, Trans Mountain is the most important, and they have started construction. So they are moving forward with this. I think some of the, I should say, quietness around this project in the last month has mainly been because of the Wet'suwet'en issues. That being said, I think we'll see a little bit more media attention in the next month, but the project continues to move forward, and we're confident that it'll be completed. Sorry. So in terms of natural gas pricing, it's leveled out a bit. This isn't the best graph. It doesn't tell you too much, but it has leveled out a bit. In 2018, we actually saw prices drop below 0. So we were essentially selling our product for free and making it up in the utility space. We haven't seen that in the last kind of year and a half, or year, I should say. So we are a little bit more stable that way. Again, I think the virus is going to affect these prices, especially in terms of LNG. LNG, about 90% of the global demand is in Southeast Asia. So as we look to movement of goods and services, and also investment in a time where economies are starting to, shut down, for lack of a better description, I think we're going to start to see more volatility in the natural gas space. So in terms of natural gas markets, again, high volatility, and we're really looking to LNG. So there is LNG opportunity in Alberta. In southern Alberta, some of Shell's assets were actually sold this year to a company called Puriday, and they're looking to move forward with an East Coast LNG project. So natural gas would essentially be moved through our main lines through the States to the eastern seaboard, back up to Halifax, and they're hoping to build an LNG terminal in Halifax for distribution to Europe, specifically Germany. One of the reasons for this is because it's non-fracked gas, and that's where some of these European companies are looking to go. So for the most part, they're getting most of their gas from Russia, and so they're looking to move away from that. So that's one interesting kind of caveat for the Southern Alberta story. In terms of other LNG opportunities in the near future, we're looking to export opportunities on the West Coast out of Kitimat, Prince Rupert, the Northwest Coast, and some of the
18-month
regions, so Grand Prairie, as well as Northeast BC, but there is quite a bit of opportunity for LNG out of Grand Prairie. So in terms of priorities, these are what we're looking at right now in Alberta. Some of these fall under the red tape reduction, which is really just our general umbrella of regulatory issues that we're trying to streamline. So in terms of equivalency with methane, that's a big one. We're pushing the federal government to basically sign off on our industry not being duly regulated. The main issue with this is extremely long timelines. So when the federal government is sitting, or with the cabinet sitting, it can be a couple weeks before a decision is made, and they have to be sitting to be able to do that. So a provincial government can say, no problem, let's move ahead with the regulations on this project. It could be, added months for a secondary government to approve those. The clean fuel standard is something that we're looking at across Canada. This is not in my portfolio, so if there's additional questions with this, I'm happy to connect you to the right people in CAPP, but I wanted to include it because it is one of our main priorities this year. Municipal taxes is a big one. We're working with the provincial government right now on streamlining some municipal taxes. And in the era of closure and the orphan well story, we are very aware that municipal taxes are leaving areas that have depended on them for a very long time. So looking to balance those interests. My colleague Chris Montgomery is working on that file as well. Closure liability in orphan wells. So there's about 94,000 inactive wells in Alberta right now, so a significant amount. We are working diligently to put forward to our companies a cost structure around this. So proposing, a regulation change in the sense that if you don't deal with these, it becomes a tax burden or a burden for our industry, in the sense that the Orphan Well Association will not continue to cover all of these costs. The federal government has given them a significant amount of money, but it is up to the producers to not leave these inactive and to close them in a timely manner. Otherwise, the whole program will be put on industry, and it will become our full responsibility, which will be a huge cost issue. And to further put this into perspective, it's been about an 1,800% increase in abandoned wells that need to be reclaimed from the perspective of the Orphan Well Association. So very significant. Again, I already talked on red tape reduction. We have a list of about 45 initiatives that we have either worked through already or continue to work through. And this covers anything from the camp moratorium for the oil sands or around Fort McMurray to issues like municipal taxes, enclosure, and liability. So quite significant. And we track all of those, and a lot of this initiative is public record on our website. And then lastly, I did want to talk about COVID-19 because I think it's an interesting story to tell. CAPP has not put any numbers together internally yet. I think that's something that's being looked at and worked on. But in terms of the economic channels that will affect our industry and other industries and the spin-off of other industries on the demand for oil and gas, we're looking at China right now where millions of people are in quarantine. So this has led to travel bans and restrictions. So our products not being used for travel, we're seeing a huge reduction there. As well as factory closures in China. So an interesting fact on this, but they've actually seen a 25% decrease in coal usage. So a silver lining of this is that China doesn't have very much smog right now, but in terms of fuel sources, we also, we're losing market opportunity there. And then this being said, people in quarantine leads to cutbacks in service provision. So we're losing issues there, and this all leads to supply chain disruption. So I just wanted to mention that because we will be seeing quite a bit of volatility over the course of the next year before things kind of balance out and we see what the full scope of this issue is. So I just wanted to raise this as well. I send Context Energy Examined out to all of our municipalities, so I wanted to include this, and I'm happy to email this as well. But we have two channels in CAPP of information that we give to the public that are by subscription. So Context is really great for municipalities because it gives a lot of information on the things that I've just talked about. Our other stream is Canada Energy Citizens, which is much more grassroots citizen engagement focused. So it's a little bit more, aggressive in the sense that we're trying to kind of create a grassroots movement through CEC, but Context Energy Examined is much more, what are the economics going on with industry right now, news stories in Alberta and BC, as well as Saskatchewan actually, and then interviews with key people. So I would highly recommend signing up for this. It's a monthly newsletter that comes to your inbox, and there's a lot of great information in this. And I will pass it over to you if there's any questions.
I was listening on the radio this morning, and the Supreme Court, I believe, has failed. They're not going to hear an appeal on, but I didn't catch what they were doing. It had something to do with the pipeline, Trans Mountain. Do you know what that was?
So I'm not sure specifically what that would have been. I mean, the project has been appealed in the Supreme Court, but it's been given the green light. So that may have just been a reminder of, the regulations and court decisions have been put into place to move forward with the project.
I think it had something to do with, remember that appeal, consultation court that was turned down by the appeal court, and I think that it went to. Now that might have been it, but I didn't catch the end of it. So.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure what that would have been. In terms of consultation, there were about 131 communities. I think that was the number, around 130 anyway, communities in BC that they had to go back and consult with as part of the original appeal about 2 years ago when the federal government bought the project. That being said, a lot of those issues have been either resolved or are still being worked through under contract. So the project will still move ahead, and some of these final issues will be resolved through mediation, essentially. Majority. Yeah, and it's the same with Coastal GasLink. we have a really interesting map actually that I'm happy to circulate to the broader council, but it basically shows the number that are in favor as opposed to opposition. But, you know, these issues are all how the story's told, and, you know, it's like a wildfire. Once something catches on, it just, you know, expands basically in terms of public rhetoric.
So you mentioned there's 95,000 inactive wells in Alberta, but they're not all abandoned wells, right? They're not, or am I mistaken?
That's correct. So in terms of inactive, they consider anything inactive over a 12-month period. So the lease, I mean, it's just, if it hasn't been operational in 12 months, then it's considered inactive, but that does not mean abandoned by any means. And I do have a report that I'm going to provide to you guys after, but that you can keep, but it kind of breaks down some of those numbers specific to your county.
I'm always struck with the message that we have to try to produce to the rest of our Canadian friends. And I guess with that, you know, we were asked this week to partner at FCM with in Toronto with another couple of municipalities in the north. And I guess my question is ultimately, what do Canadian oil producers have to, what is the difference in their costs with the extra carbon pricing and the emitter type responsibilities that they have to bear when they have to go to the same, when dealing with the same market as an offshore company would have to deal with. So I understand there's an inequality. I guess my question is what is that? Because it's important that I think we make that information available to our colleagues in other parts of this country. And so if you were buying oil from oil products, resource products from Saudi or Venezuela as opposed to Canada, what would that difference be?
So in terms of the differential, I can't give you a number off the top of my head. We import about I think it's $50 million a month actually of foreign oil, specifically through the St. Lawrence. Happy to get you differential numbers, especially if you want to share these with people that you're going to FCM with. In terms of differential, generally speaking, one of the issues that is becoming an industry-wide issue is that if there is so much red tape on our industry, which a lot of people don't realize, the regulation and tax burden that we have, not on a municipal level, but provincial and federal level, it is making our industry increasingly uncompetitive. And our industry is, in terms of private industry, we're the largest contributor to Canada's GDP. So there's a very interesting story to tell there, and where our dollars go to the broader Canadian public. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm happy to provide you with specific numbers that you're looking for if you want to follow up.
That does answer the question partly, but I would be really interested to know those differentials, because there's nothing better than information and hard numbers when you deal with people. And if you're saying, you know, it's the same product going into a refinery or going out the refinery, but you're competing with somebody that has already a huge advantage, and they're not even a taxpayer in your country. So, I mean, that's the message I would like to bring forth, but it'd be really good to have those numbers.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you to share them with council and with others too, because I think it's important to know that.
Yeah, most definitely. And happy to provide some graphics as well, because we do have some graphics on that. I mean, on that note, one of the assets that Canada, or advantages that Canada has, is our price differential in terms of markets. You know, when you look at natural gas, we're cost so much lower than any other international price. And that actually does provide a competitive advantage, because we are a reliable provider, and our product is very cheap. So it begs the question, like, why aren't we having an influx of foreign investment and Canadian grassroots investment as well, when we're the cheapest on the global market, right? So, yeah.
But that's the market, getting it to market issue involved in that too, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Wayne?
I've been watching the news the last week, 2 weeks about this natural gas pipeline going out to the coast and the resistance to it. And it was extremely frustrating for me when I listened to the media. You would hear interviews after interviews of people opposed to it saying that the indigenous people who were opposed to it were being taken advantage of. And never, hardly at all, were the people, that 85% of the people who were in favor of it, the indigenous people, were ever interviewed or their opinion broadcast on national TV. So the rest of Canada gets the opinion that the oil companies are taking advantage of them. I think what you have to do is start letting the rest of Canada understand that this is a great advantage to these people and they want it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not getting that message through. People are in Ontario and Quebec and everything think we're just bulldozing our way through this. And it's not that at all. They want it, but there's a few who are opposing it and they're getting their way, where it's not right.
So there. We're used
Yeah.
Kelly, we're used to Wayne.
No,
you might not be.
I mean, that's the sentiment, I think, most places. As I said, I think when like a certain rhetoric catches fire in Canada, especially in terms of Indigenous issues, it's very rapid. I think that the media has been better this time around. I mean, major newspaper publications about telling the other side of the story. I think, to credit TC Energy, they've had senior leadership be very public about the fact that their doors have always been open to these hereditary chiefs, and people aren't showing up, basically. So I think that's the messaging that energy companies need to be giving, is that we have consulted and our doors are always open, which is an effective way for consultation to work. Once an agreement is made, I think that relationship still needs to continue. But yeah, I think that there does need to be more aggressive communication on what's happening on the ground.
Other questions? Clarence?
You mentioned the tax burden federally, provincially, municipality-wise. Would you be able to share that with us?
So, I mean, a big part of it is the equivalency payment. So there's, not only is there regulatory burdens in terms of timelines, but there's also dual tax burdens in Canada. So I can't really get into specific numbers, but it's the multiple levels of taxation that companies are dealing with right now. In Alberta, municipal tax issues are bigger than they are in any other province in our industry. So again, that continues to be a priority. But I can't get into too much detail because it's not so much my area of expertise, but again, happy to share some of that information out. Sorry that I can't better answer that.
When you say that municipal tax burden in Alberta is greater than in other provinces?
Not that it's a greater burden, but it's a greater issue. And I think part of that is because Alberta is dealing with the spin-offs of the recession greater than other provinces are. In Northeast BC, for example, in the Montney Basin and in Grand Prairie, they have more access just based on their resource and conventional drilling in those areas, which is where producers have looked because it's a cheaper form of getting the product out of the ground. They've had more opportunity to diversify their products. So they're moving into the LNG space, propane, some of these other, you know, even condensate, some of these other products that are cheaper to produce, whereas some other areas of Alberta do not have the luxury of that. So, where was I going with this? So I guess that being said, in some of those areas, the tax burden hasn't been as much of an issue for some of the producers that operate in those areas. Whereas, you know, in the far north, so like high level area in Mackenzie County, they've seen major abandonment, and that's a huge portion of their tax base. And it's because it's not cost effective for those producers to produce there anymore. So what we're looking at with the provincial government is, you know, what's the way of balancing this issue out from, you know, a broader municipal tax base, because one size doesn't fit all, but that's the application, generally speaking.
So the value of natural gas in itself is low. The condensate is where the dollars are.
Yeah. Yeah, very low. But again, I mean, in the past, there's a lot of interesting stories to tell through this downturn, because we have seen such a diversification of product development. So, yeah, as I said, you know, plastics industries have popped up in Alberta. Condensates, propane is a huge one. So that's, yeah, ethylene.
Other questions? Wayne? It's okay.
You mentioned something about fracked gas. Like, Germany doesn't want fracked gas. They just want conventional produced gas. And most of that would come from Western Canada?
So Southern Alberta actually has one of the largest deposits of gas that doesn't need to be fracked in the world. So there is a huge economic opportunity there. And so in terms of transportation, I mean, liquid natural gas, as I said, is where we're looking in terms of environmental footprint as well. Like, to put that into perspective, if you were to convert a cruise ship to liquid natural gas, like, and take it off of diesel, just one cruise ship, that's the equivalent of taking 20,000 cars off the road, lifetime cycle. So the environmental footprint is huge. And in Canada, in the industry sphere, we're already hitting our targets. The issue with Canada and environmental footprint is that we're a massive country and it's very cold. So we have a lot of our emissions actually come from the transportation space. So, I mean, there's always work to be done in the environmental area, but when we look to Asian countries that are still on coal and other more intensive hydrocarbon fuels, you know, LNG is makes a very good case for, you know, being progressive in the environmental area. So now I've forgotten your question, but I think so that's it. I mean, I think in terms of fracking, some people view it as more intensive to the land. And Germany is extremely progressive, for lack of a better word, in that space. And so they're looking to move into that sphere. Yeah.
So when we look at per capita of usage for fuel, Canada will never be at the bottom of that, simply because, number one, low population, large distances, and temperature. All necessarily have to be, all those things have to be, I mean, you got to keep people warm, you got to keep people moving from space to space, you got to get products moving from space to space, and you got to do it in volume.
Yeah.
You know, when we see stats that go on a per capita basis, we'll always lose out. And so when you see numbers that compare compare us to others because of, on a per capita basis. What do they really mean? Like, it's not to our advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's not always apples to apples with the comparisons, yeah. I mean, I would say it's, for me, very simple messaging. In the top 10 producing oil and gas countries in the world, Canada is the only one with environmental regulations, the only one in the top 10. So that in itself, I mean, that's a message, right? In terms of greenhouse gas policies, I should say. But yeah, Canada, always, from an industrial level, as I've said, we're already doing, you know, we're in the top 1% in terms of contributing to these broader global climate goals. And as you know, climate does not have borders, so we're doing our best to contribute. But in terms of actually bringing global levels down, Canada has a huge part to play. We're sharing our product and getting off of coal and some of these other more intensive hydrocarbons, as I said.
So it's interesting when you mentioned cruise ship changing to natural gas. Is that a practical, is it possible that...
They are starting to convert. So it's challenging for older cruise ships that are still operational, but to switch gears a little bit, BC Ferries has started converting their ships to compressed natural gas and liquid natural gas. So it's possible, and through, you know, producing more cruise ships, they are looking at these alternative fuel sources. So it's amazing. Yeah.
Seeing no more questions, thank you, Kelly. That was a nice presentation and some good stats. Not as perhaps as dismal or negative as some of the things that we have come to us regarding oil and gas these days. So keep up the good work of bringing along a little bit of positive with the facts. And yeah, and we're going to break for lunch. If you'd like to join us for lunch, you're more than welcome. I don't know if you have to be somewhere else soon, but we just have lunch through that exit door there, brought in. And what's lunch today, Ariana?
Fried chicken and salads. I can smell it. It smells good.
Fried chicken. All right. Guys, when do you want to start again? 1:45? Okay, 11 or 12:45, we'll reconvene.